Louisville Metro Police Department, Public Integrity Unit, official statement, case number...
This interview is being conducted at the Public Integrity Unit office.
Are you giving this interview of your own free will?
Yes. Well, no, we were pulled over and got out of the car and we were separated.
I had some possession of hypodermic needle charges.
I told him that I was on parole and I couldn't afford a charge.
And he said, well, give me your number so I can work with you.
He's like, I'll call you later tonight and we'll discuss your charges.
You're gonna have to come down here and fill out paperwork.
I filled out the paperwork. He took pictures of me, like made me turn around. Within probably 10 minutes of the text conversation, it went to just different sexual comments.
We'll have sex in my truck and I'll make these charges go away.
He sent me a picture.
What was that picture of?
His genitalia.
His penis?
Yeah.
How many times do you think you had warrants and he let you go without locking you up?
He's never let me go without giving him head.
Why did you continue texting with him when he's texting all this?
Because I had court coming up.
He's a narcotic police. He could say, I witnessed her buying drugs, and that's going to violate my parole.
He tried to have that leverage over me.
I knew he had that over my head.
He's a cop. He has a gun. He has total authority over me. What am I going to do?
I seen the Snapchat username, which is BTBailey58. So I kind of thought about it for a minute and I was like, there's no way. What would this detective want to add me on Snapchat for,
In 2016, Tommy Robinson was caught up in a drug bust. A year after the arrest, she says she started getting messages from one of the arresting officers, Brian Bailey.
He would sometimes ask me if I knew anybody that he could bust for drugs. Progressively, he started sending inappropriate pictures of his penis, or ask for pictures of me. He'd be like, oh, send me a picture of your ass or your boobs. And I'm like, what? No.
How many pics of his penis would you say he sent you?
I would say close to 100.
Close to 100?
Yeah. I would say that over the course from 2017 up until 2021. That's how long he was Snapchatting me.
And at some point, does he go from sending you these inappropriate pictures to asking to meet up?
Yes. Around February of 2017, Bailey was Snapchatting me and was asking me what I was doing, and I told him where I was at, and he was like, well, I'm in that area. And I got in the car with him. I was still going through my court case, so I was thinking maybe if I don't piss him off, maybe he could help me. But he tried to make a move. He kind of just touched my leg and leaned in to kiss me. I don't know, I just got creeped out. I knew that there was no way I was the only one that he was talking to like that. It just came too easy for him to talk the way he was.
Robinson's charges were eventually dismissed, but she kept hearing from Bailey. She was far from the only woman he was soliciting for sex. And Bailey isn't the only LMPD officer to engage in this type of behavior. Internal documents and recordings going back more than a decade, and interviews with multiple accusers, as well as current and former members of LMPD, show a pattern of sexual misconduct by officers and repeated failure of the department to take allegations seriously. By not thoroughly investigating initial complaints, LMPD allowed problem officers to continue acting unchecked, and in some cases, to victimize more women. Do you know of anyone else that has had a similar experience with Bailey?
I have a friend that also had the same experience with him. The Snapchats, promises to get you out of trouble if you do so and so.
Louisville Metro Police Department Public Integrity Unit official statement. Today's date is Tuesday, February the 16th of 2016.
Robinson didn't know it at the time, But less than a month before her arrest, LMPD's Public Integrity Unit, which investigates potential crimes by officers, had already opened an investigation into allegations that Bailey was sexually coercing her friend Megan. In her first interview, Megan was reluctant to tell investigators the full extent of Bailey's behavior, and her fears were validated days later when she says she got a text from Bailey that said, "I knew you were solid."
The police were investigating the police, in my opinion. That's the way I looked at it. So I knew what Detective Bailey was capable of, and so I don't look at them the same anymore, them as in police officers.
And was that confirmed when Bailey texted you within the week after you gave the interview?
Yes, and I knew I had did the right thing.
Do you know if one of the LMPD investigators who talked to you or some other officer had told Bailey what you had said?
There were only 3 of us there, so I didn't.
But 2 weeks after she says Bailey texted, Megan called investigators back anyway to disclose more details.
He was sending me pictures of his penis, which I have on my phone, and I'm not going to lie to you, I had to flirt with him, because if not, then he had already told me that with my drug charge, I wouldn't even be able to go on a field trip with my daughter or anything.
According to the case file, investigators lost track of her after this call and never got the phone she said contained evidence. 6 months later, they asked Bailey for an interview. He said no, and they closed the case, clearing Bailey. 3 years after that, another woman, who we'll call Jane Doe, and who'd worked for Bailey as an informant, came forward with an even more serious allegation.
I got arrested.
Okay.
When I got out, he showed up and told me I owed him.
Owed him what?
Pretty much that's what he wanted, was his dick sucked. He'd call me up or text me and say, you know you owe me.
At the time, investigators made it clear that they weren't going to check Bailey's phones just on her word.
Well, I have to have some reason to get the messages. I have to have some reason or some reasonable grounds to believe that.
I mean, I'm telling you, like a couple different times I had oral sex with him. I saved the clothes.
Jane Doe had DNA evidence, which forced LMPD's hand.
This is Sergeant Omar Lee of Louisville Metro Police Public Integrity Unit. Today's date is May the 20th of 2020. This will be a recorded statement with Officer Brian Bailey.
It took 3 months for LMPD to bring in Officer Bailey for an interview. It was the first time he'd ever been asked any questions about sexual misconduct in an official setting.
Have you ever asked for any kind of nude pictures of her or anything like that?
Don't believe so, no. We've been working together for 5 years, or at least, I mean, there's nothing.
Okay, and none of that time had ever crossed over into the...
No, we never went out on a date. She's a 55-year-old woman.
That's the allegation, so that's why I have to ask that question.
I understand.
I hate to put you in that situation if it's not true, but that is the allegation, and she's saying that you were forcing her to perform oral sex in exchange for getting out of trouble. So I have to ask you straight up, and you're saying no, that's never occurred.
I mean, I'm scared. Obviously, I don't. No.
And she had a shirt with semen on it that she says is yours. So she has saved that shirt for quite some time. We've sent that to the lab. Lab comes back that it is bodily fluids. So I have a search warrant for your DNA today.
Yeah, I guess I need to ask for an attorney at this point.
Okay, that's fine.
During Bailey's interview, investigators implied that Jane Doe might be the one who was lying.
Omar's not going to charge you with anything. You know, we don't have proof.
Right.
You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
She's basically alleging official misconduct because she is saying that you basically, or she was forced into a position to give you oral sex in exchange for getting out of trouble. So, and then with her having the DNA, I had to go the next step to either validate or disprove her story.
And I told him, you know, if it's disproving, we're going to pursue her as much as we would pursue anything.
Correct. You're free to leave, my friend.
All right, thank you.
Have a good rest of your day. Appreciate you coming down and cooperating with me.
It took another 11 months before the DNA proved she was telling the truth. The semen on Jane's t-shirt was Bailey's. And while investigators were waiting on the results, another woman came forward with an almost identical story.
How many times do you think you had warrants and he let you go without locking you up?
He's never let me go without giving him head, so, I mean, like 30, like I said, like 30.
Okay. So every time?
Every time.
The woman said that Bailey held the threat of arrest over her if she didn't do what he wanted.
So when you say he forces you, has he ever threatened to hit you, hurt you?
No.
Has he ever pulled a weapon on you or anything like that?
Mm-mm. But I was like, well, what if I don't get hurt? He's like, I gotta take you to jail.
One time, she says, he even threatened to plant heroin on her.
He said, like, bag of heroin. Not on my lap, but like by me. You know what I'm saying? He's like, where'd that come from? I'm like, really? That's what I said.
Okay, and then what happened after that?
I gave him head.
Okay.
Had no choice. I mean, even though I'm on drugs, I don't think I was right that I could think all the times. And then I got so tired of just giving him head because this is like beginning to be an everyday thing. I went to Stanford crying, and I told Stanford, I was like, Stanford, I can't do this anymore.
This Stanford is Officer Stafford, another LMPD cop. She says she told him about what was going on about a year earlier.
I was like, Stanford, please make him stop. Like, and then he gave me a phone number to call, and I never called it because I was too scared because I thought I was going to go to jail.
Case files suggest that even though she was too scared to report, Officer Stafford called PIU, but it's unclear if investigators ever followed up. She and Jane Doe joined a third woman in suing Bailey and the department.
3 more women have come forward. All of them say Bailey sexually abused them.
The woman claims Detective Brian Bailey sexually assaulted her and threatened her with criminal charges.
In the lawsuit, the women say LMPD knew about Bailey's behavior and did nothing to stop it. A lawyer for Bailey declined to comment, citing the ongoing case, but in a court filing denied the allegations. Still, even after the lawsuit was filed, Bailey continued sending inappropriate messages.
The last message was 51 weeks ago.
That's not even a year ago.
Yep, right here. You can see.
BT Bailey 58.
Yep.
Court records in the civil suit show he was also sending dirty texts to multiple other women, including Megan, the woman who originally reported Bailey for sending sexually explicit pictures back in 2016. She testified that he'd gone further than that and abused her too.
He was aggressive. He was breathing all over my face and kissing all over my neck, and then he was ramming his fingers into my pants. That type of stuff turned him on to be in control. He told me that.
Even though that criminal case was dismissed, were you still in fear of Brian Bailey?
Yes, because over the time period of us talking, he started telling me about, in his words, the real criminals are people like him.
You got both your personal and work home.
Investigators waited until May 2021 to seize Bailey's phone, 15 months after Jane Doe was first interviewed.
You want to give us the passcode or it's up to you?
Bailey was supposed to be interviewed a second time as part of a follow-up investigation into possible policy violations. But that never happened because he resigned the day before his scheduled interview. The number of women Bailey solicited is likely much higher than the handful who've come forward. Internal investigative files show that LMPD was made aware of at least 4 other women who'd been subject to similar behavior. No effort appears to have ever been made to reach them. The exchange of sexual favors for staying out of jail has been described to us as the deal. And the allegations aren't unique to Brian Bailey. In 2014, another narcotics officer, Carl Payne, pled guilty to official misconduct for soliciting women he'd arrested for sex in exchange for helping them out with their court cases. And at least 2 more LMPD narcotics officers have been accused of the same thing. One of them made headlines for another controversy.
Former LMPD officer Brett Hankinson was there the night they executed a no-knock search warrant at Breonna Taylor's apartment in March of 2020.
Hankinson, a detective at the time, fired multiple shots into a window.
I was actually sitting here. This picture was on TV, and I just cried, and I was shocked in myself that my emotions were still so strong after that many years.
In 2014, Detective Brett Hankinson raided the hotel room where Brittany McKinney was bringing clients she met on Backpage, a site commonly used for sex work. Officers found drugs and threatened to arrest her.
Brett took me outside on the balcony, and he was like, well, the options were you could turn in 3 people. And then he pretty much brought up like I could hook up with him, and he wouldn't turn the ticket in either.
When you heard that, were you surprised?
No. Once he told me about the pictures on Backpage that he had seen all those, like he knew like the shorts, like shoes, everything. Described pictures that had already been deleted like for a long time. So at this point I knew he'd been like watching me for a while, kind of like almost like stalking me. You know, I was an easy target because I was doing Backpage. Like I would probably easily have sex with him.
McKinney was on probation at the time, and an arrest could have sent her back to jail. So she agreed to be a confidential informant. Hankinson wrote her a citation, but didn't turn it in. Instead, he held on to it, in case she failed to hold up her end of the deal.
I mean, in a way, I almost feel like I had to be like nice to him or flirt with him in a way, because I felt like if I completely just disregarded him right off the bat, that he would just turn my ticket in.
What sort of stuff would Hankinson say to you over the phone?
Like how he thought I was just sexy, and I felt like he almost thought I would want to have like, you know, you want to hook up with like an officer, like this was like a prize for me to hook up with like somebody like him. He was very like aggressive and pushy toward me. I didn't like that at all.
How pushy did he get during these interactions?
I mean, the last interaction we had, I met him at this warehouse, which I don't really like talking about. It makes me cry, but he was just like really terrible to me.
Almost a month after meeting McKinney, Hankinson filed the charges he'd been sitting on. Then, 2 months later, he called McKinney's parole officer to ask why her probation hadn't been revoked. The parole officer confronted McKinney about what was going on, and then reported Hankinson to LMPD.
Louisville Metro Police Department Public Integrity Unit official statement. Ms. McKinney, are you aware this interview is being audio recorded?
Yes.
Were you afraid to talk to PIU about what happened?
Yeah. At first, I wasn't going to talk to him just because I was doing like the shady stuff I was doing. And I felt like, you know, they were going to use like what I was doing anyways, like Backpage, and I was on drugs. They could use that against me as well. And I feel like they kind of, you know, looked down on me type of thing anyways.
When McKinney told investigators she was also working with another officer, investigators latched onto it and then used it against her.
We would just ask you something point blank. Are you manipulating both these officers in order to get your charges dismissed or not turned in?
It was terrible. He kind of like belittled me in a way. And some of it he acted like I was making up too. As so I was just so against Brett, if I had sex with the other cop, if that's why I wasn't telling on him.
You're not the special one if these guys are doing this stuff. I don't know. But if you think you're the special one, you better get over it now. Because I can guarantee you what will happen if we go over and talk to both of them. They would throw you under the bus so fast and so hard, your head would be spinning.
That's exactly what Hankinson did when investigators brought him in for an interview 6 months later.
Instantly, I started thinking that, like, she's going to want to try to just get her shit dismissed by fucking me or whatever. And I was like, I don't know if I feel comfortable using her as a CI. Well, Sarge's like, dude, you know as well as I do, these CIs are fucking dime a dozen. They're like, you know, we use them and abuse them anyway, you know, and get what we can out of them. He said, I don't think it's worth getting caught in a trick bag or whatever for you to use this girl because obviously she's bad news.
Investigators repeatedly took Hankinson at his word, even when his account was directly contradicted by material evidence. Hankinson claimed he only ever communicated with McKinney on his work phone, which he voluntarily handed over. And investigators used the records to discredit McKinney, pointing to sexually explicit texts she'd sent that Hankinson never responded to.
But you were sending him pictures or sending him text. The way I interpret it is you were open for a sexual relationship. Is that not what those texts would indicate to you?
Mm-hmm.
But those same records suggest that Hankison was also using another phone to communicate with McKinney. The last time the two spoke over his work phone was October 10th, 2014. But they both told investigators that they continued talking for weeks. And one of McKinney's texts references a call on October 13th. But there's no record of a missed call on Hankison's work phone. McKinney told investigators that Hankison was using another number, but they never tried to get that phone. And they never really tried to resolve what actually happened at the warehouse. You never told Internal Affairs about what happened outside of the warehouse?
I mean, I kind of told Internal Affairs a little bit. I told him that he had asked me to meet him there. He asked me to meet him one night in Taylorsville at a warehouse. And I did. I met him there. And he was in a truck. And he pretty much, tried to fuck me. And they kind of just disregarded what I had to say and kind of like blew me off and didn't believe me. Or I'm not sure if they didn't believe me or they just didn't care.
Would you be shocked to learn that she told us that she actually met you at a warehouse while you were off duty?
No.
That wouldn't shock you?
Like I was working off duty?
No, she said she come out, y'all had a conversation, right, and she met you out at a warehouse in Taylorsville near where you lived.
No, that's not true. And yes, that would say it was a lie. I don't believe that. Well, I mean, I believe that she told you that, but I've never met her outside of work, period, ever, one time. I don't know where there's any warehouses. Even I don't go into except to, I might go run in to get, a gallon of milk or something like that. I wouldn't be familiar with a warehouse to even meet at.
One thing Hankison did admit is trying to revoke McKinney's parole.
But just in conclusion, I would like to say, I think what he's upset with me about is that I'm the one who called Floyd County Criminal Attorney's Office myself. I took it upon myself to call them. This is the only reason I can think about, other than she got her feelings hurt because I wouldn't fuck her, that I've tried to get her revoked over in Floyd County, which is true. I did try. I mean, I don't think she was doing a good job on diversion when she's out prostituting on Backpage. So
it never seemed to occur to investigators that this could have been retaliation. And this wasn't even the first time LMPD had received a sexual misconduct complaint against Hankison. According to a case file from another PIU investigation, in 2008, Hankison was accused of letting a woman off in exchange for oral sex. The case was closed without Hankison or any other officer being interviewed. McKinney's case was eventually closed too. PIU concluded that the allegations were proven false. They did recommend that the case be investigated for any potential policy violations related to the handling of CIs, but that never happened.
I definitely blame him, of course, but of course it's bigger than Brett as well, right? I feel like Internal Affairs kind of, failed me. If maybe they would have taken me seriously or other women, maybe he wouldn't have done it to other women.
In 2020, Hankison was fired for his involvement in the raid that led to Breonna Taylor's death. That same year, a woman filed a lawsuit alleging that Hankison sexually assaulted her after driving her home from a bar where he worked off duty. The suit named several LMPD officers for failure to report and intervene sooner. In court filings, Hankison denied these allegations. Lawyers for LMPD called them defamatory and unsupported. The lawsuit was dismissed and is currently on appeal. When asked for comment on allegations of sexual misconduct, Hankison pointed out that they'd been investigated by LMPD and closed without findings of wrongdoing. The police department has made it difficult to get basic information and records. When we asked to see all internal investigations into sexual misconduct, LMPD refused, calling the request overly burdensome. They also refused to answer any questions or make any officers available for comment, citing ongoing litigation. But a current LMPD sex crimes detective agreed to sit down with us. We're hiding their identity because the police department has a strict policy against speaking to the media. You could face pretty serious repercussions for talking to us.
Yes, correct.
Why did you decide to?
I think it's unfair to victims. I think victims, they need to be heard. PIU needs to investigate. It doesn't matter if it's a cop or who it is. A victim has rights.
Watching the way in which a lot of these women are questioned, It's hard not to feel like the driving assumption is that they're making it up.
You know, these are great victims. I hate to say it like that, but these are victims that are hard to believe. It's hard to prove sexual assaults, and I think it's even harder when it's an officer and a victim has to come forward and knowing that the department is going to be investigating one of their own.
So I want to play you a clip of an interview of Brian Bailey. When we played interviews from some of the internal investigations, the detective picked up on a few of the things that had also stood out to us. Investigators were treating cops very differently than their accusers, and they weren't challenging suspicious responses by officers.
Anytime during the phone conversations or exchange, have you ever asked for any kind of nude pictures of her or anything like that?
Don't believe so, no.
Well, right there's a lie. I mean, it's either yes or no. You either know that you sent pictures or you didn't.
And key evidence wasn't immediately being obtained.
I think his phone should have been downloaded immediately. You have enough evidence, you have probable cause to ask for it. I mean, a year later, evidence is lost.
The delay in seizing his phones and other failures by investigators are also highlighted in the civil suit. When some of the more public allegations of sexual abuse come out, ones against officers like Brett Hankison or Brian Bailey, are people internally surprised? Were they surprised?
No, not at all.
Why not?
Brett Hankison and Brian Bailey are who they are. Brett Hankison used to come to FOP parties, and he would always come with always 3 women, very young women. They were probably 20 and he was in his 40s, or close to 40. If he worked with Brian Bailey, he's married. He was always texting other officers, asking them out, or just saying inappropriate things.
Multiple current and former officers told us the same things about both Brett Hankison and Brian Bailey. What's the perception of the Public Integrity Unit in the department?
If you know the right people, then you may not even get investigated. But on our department, if you were to say something, and again, you're not in the popular crowd, they will come after you and let the bad egg continue to be the bad egg.
If someone came to you and told you that something had happened to them and a police officer had done it, what would you tell them to do? Would you tell them to go to the police department?
No. With PIU, I can't say that they would do a thorough investigation against a cop.
We ask hard questions because hard questions get asked of us.
Yeah.
Okay? We're not investigating somebody spray painting the side of somebody's house.
Yeah, but
okay, these are pretty serious things.
Time that this guy has been looked into, because all the young girls in the West End knows him and knows.
Maybe nobody else has came forward until you.
Well, that's probably probably a smart idea that they didn't. And I wish I wouldn't have.
In hindsight, I mean, I don't know that it even did me any good to talk to him. I don't really think so.
Allegations of sexual assault and misconduct on the part of police officers aren't unique to LMPD. Phil Stinson is a former cop who spent years building a database of crimes committed by police officers.
So this is just a spreadsheet of all the cases in the system. We have 20,433 cases of an officer being arrested since January of 2005.
He categorizes about 10% of those 20,000 cases as crimes of sexual violence.
This might just be the tip of the iceberg. It might be that this conduct is even worse than I think it is, more prevalent than I think it is. And I think it's widespread at many agencies across the country.
His research attempts to quantify something that he used to see firsthand.
So when I was a young police officer, there were a few women in the city that I worked in that had a reputation that this is somebody that you can coerce into sexual activity. And it was written off that it was a woman. She's coming on to the officers. It's her that's the problem. And what we know now is it's just simply not the case, that police officers use the power and control that come with the badge and the gun, the authority of being a police officer, to manipulate and coerce a vulnerable person into sexual acts.
Do these officers have an inflated sense of power, or are they just aware of how much power they have?
Well, they do have a lot of power, and they think they're invincible. They think they're not going to get caught. They've seen other officers engage in these types of activities and get away with it. That's part of the police socialization process. Police chiefs adhere to the bad apples theory. They'll publicly state that we've got a problem officer when it just can't be ignored anymore. The problem is, what my research has identified is it's really a rotten barrel problem. It's the culture of policing.
I don't think people realize what really goes on out there. And I had a glimpse into what goes on out there. And it's terrifying because I feel like everyone is one police interaction away from their life being destroyed.
For Heather Richards, that interaction started on an otherwise unremarkable day. She met LMPD officer Pablo Cano while bike riding in the park. Then, a few nights later, he stopped by her house while on duty.
And then he started to kiss me. It kind of just accelerated from there. I just remember on the sun porch, I could feel like the weight of like the gun. And then there was a spot of Velcro that was rubbing on my hip that like I just focused on because it's easier to focus on something else. I could not believe what was happening. I mean, never in a million years would I think that meeting an on-duty officer on my front steps would end that way. He stood up and pulled his pants up and started to put himself back together. And I just remember he was tucking in his shirt and said, "I can't go back looking like a shit show." And I mean, I was on the couch crying. And so, you know, I thought, like, the nerve of you, that you're worried about tucking in your shirt and looking presentable to go back to work after you raped me.
Richard says that 2 days later, Cano came back to her house and raped her again.
So I thought my worst case scenario is I go to the hospital, get a forensic exam. They ask who raped me. I tell them it's an on-duty cop. He's on right now. They put a call out. He hears the call come through. Him or his buddies show up at the hospital and terrorize me further.
It took her almost a year to work up the courage to go to the police.
That was the first 4+ hours of interview, or as I call it, interrogation.
Why do you call it interrogation?
So you're in this tiny gray cinder block room. I'm scared to death. And you have these two men sort of, you know, and you have to give them these horrible details and graphic details of what happened. And, you know, there I am defending my own words or actions in a moment of extreme trauma. And they're just trying to tear them apart and intimidate me.
Tell me what happened.
I did. I told you for 3 hours the other day. And again today. I mean, I had no intention of inviting him in. I had no intention of having sex with him. He fucking forced himself on me.
And then he doesn't even call you.
I don't fucking care.
At that point, I definitely got the sense that nothing may happen, that this might just go nowhere.
How do I get him?
I don't know. That's why you're paid the big bucks, I guess. I don't know. Do your magic.
I don't know. How do you get anyone
with proof
to confess a crime? What proof do I have except that I lived through it? I mean, if you're telling me it's not enough, then fucking let him go out and rape a bunch of other people and you'll deal with it later.
Richards filed a lawsuit against the city. After her allegations went public, 8 more women came forward to say that Cano had raped them too. 5 of them spoke to LMPD.
He showed up at my house and he showed up in a police car. I thought we were going to have a conversation, but he kind of put me up against the wall and pinned me and kissed me and he had put his gun down on the table and immediately came over and like grabbed me like around behind my head.
And at that point, he just grabbed me by the back of my hair and head.
But he had the uniform on and he had that vest that has like that.
The bulletproof?
I guess that's what it is.
He had a bulletproof vest on, and I could feel his gun hitting the back of my leg.
Did he have his gun belt on at the
Yes.
time? And he had his uniform shirt on?
Yes.
He never took any of that stuff off?
No. He tells me he can't take his clothes off. He has to hurry up and get home.
I just froze, and he pulled his pants up and just walked out the door and didn't say anything.
When PIU interviewed an officer who worked with Kano, she described concerning behavior that was widely known, but apparently had never been reported.
It was no secret to anybody on the platoon that he was having sex with people he met as a police officer.
So it wouldn't be out of the ordinary if he left his beat and went to somebody's house and had sex.
No, that's very
something that
par for the
possibly
course. Yes, sir. He would talk about just how regular sex wasn't enough and how it had to get dirtier, how it had to get more physical, riskier.
The officer recounted a story she'd heard about a week before the news of the lawsuit against Kano broke, when a new commanding officer was taking roll call for their platoon.
It was his first night on late watch and says exactly that. Who are my problem children? Every single person at the roll call table turns, points at Kano. He starts laughing and looking down and says, "Yes, sir, I'm a rapist and a sexual deviant. What can I say?"
After interviewing several more witnesses and accusers, investigators brought Heather Richards back in. Months earlier, they'd pointed to text messages she sent as potential evidence that she hadn't actually been raped. This time, they turned to her internet search history.
You Googled certain things before your first interview. One of them was, can I remain? You did. I have the reports.
Okay, yeah.
One of them was, can I remain anonymous after a rape incident?
Oh, right.
You did ask that. The other question that you asked that I'm curious about is, what do I say in a police interview?
What do I say? I don't know that I would word it that way.
Did you Google that to look up answers that you should give about questions that could be asked of you?
No. I mean, I wouldn't have gone in ever if I wasn't going in to say exactly what happened.
At this point, the investigator was brought a binder where Richard's entire internet search history had been printed out.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. What should I do in a police interview?
Which sounds way less bad than we.
Yeah, it does. It absolutely does. But
Right.
my question is, did you Google that to try to know certain things, key phrases to say in regards to it? Okay. I understand. That's the way that it will be portrayed by somebody who's a lot
Wait a
less.
minute, that's super creepy.
They were tearing apart with a fine-tooth comb all of the victims' lives. And I'm sure if they had something to leverage against me, they would have.
Investigators repeatedly explained their probing questions by pointing to an eventual cross-examination by a defense attorney. Except Heather Richards never got the chance to testify because Pablo Kano was offered a plea deal.
A former Louisville Metro police officer has been sentenced to 5 years in prison. Pablo Kano pleaded guilty to multiple counts of sexual misconduct.
Kano was accused by 5 women of forcing them to have sex.
The officer was extended a professional courtesy, even as a criminal defendant, where he was able to go to court once and have everything handled. In other words, he could go, be arraigned, enter his plea, and be sentenced all in one court appearance, so as not to humiliate the officer from the aggravation of having to go to court multiple times. That doesn't happen for other criminal defendants.
In 15 minutes, this whole thing plays out. He's charged, he pleads, and he's whisked away. And I was like, where are they taking him? What's happening? We were willing to testify, and we wanted him to do a lot of time.
Instead, the felony rape charges were amended down to 5 counts of sexual misconduct, all misdemeanors. Kano was sentenced to 5 years in prison, with the chance of parole even sooner.
Everything's taken away when you're raped. It's taken away when you report, and they took it away in court.
The prosecutor on the case told Vice News that there wasn't enough evidence to prove the more serious sexual assault charges beyond a reasonable doubt. For the past year, the Department of Justice has been investigating potential civil rights abuses at LMPD, including the department's handling of complaints and internal investigations. We reached out to the PIU investigators seen in this piece, and none of them responded. In Bailey's case, the survivors are still waiting for criminal charges. LMPD investigators concluded that his actions did reach the level of crimes, but as they noted in their own report, by the time the criminal investigation was concluded, the statute of limitations had long passed. The Commonwealth Attorney's Office says it's still considering charges. Prosecutors could charge him with forcible sodomy, which is a felony, but that seems unlikely given the department and city's track record.
That's the most frustrating part, is that he basically, as of right now, has gotten away with it.
I'm pretty sure there's always going to be that type of officer out there. I just hope that now maybe if they're like a sex worker or on drugs, I still hope that they would be believed rather than ridiculed by internal affairs.
They prey on the vulnerable people who don't have a voice, for so many reasons can't or won't speak up. And if they do report, they're silenced or nothing happens. That's just sending a big message, like, we don't care if you're raped. We don't care what this cop does to you. He can do whatever he wants, and we're not going to do anything about it.
I'm Michael Learmonth, editor-in-chief of Vice News. Too often, traditional news outlets shy away from the real stories and experiences of those living through global conflicts. Not Vice News. Our reporters are on the ground, fearlessly covering the human stories that shape our world. You and millions of others can continue to read, watch, and listen to Vice News for free. But we hope you'll consider making a one-time or ongoing contribution of any size at vice.com/contribute. Every contribution, no matter how big or small, helps support the journalism Vice News brings to you every day. Thank you.